This it's exactly like saying, how is it different between a cop and a robber when they're both pointing guns at each other and they're both making each other feel threatened? Isn't that the exact same thing? Yes, sure, it is the exact same act, but it is a different motivation. Okay, that's what the difference is. Because when you have a regime like the Islamic Republic or Hamas, that's literal inception and existence is based on the destruction of Israel and death to America, and basically just killing everybody who disagrees with their ideology, and another entity whose focus is on protecting its people. Yes, the actions may look the same. And in fact, the actions may be just as wrong as each other. They may be just as brutal and terroristic as each other, but the motivation is different. And to be demoralized means to not understand.
But hang on a second. All right, let me jump in there, because actually, what difference does it make to the innocent civilians who are... It
doesn't make a difference.
Well, hang on. What difference does it make to innocent civilians who are killed whether one has a better, motivation for doing it? Because my problem with what Israel's doing in Gaza is that, in direct contrast to what it did in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in direct contrast to what it did in Iran, both very precise, very targeted, very successful operations, minimal civilian casualties. In Gaza, in Gaza, the strategy has been completely different. It's been a strategy of sort of nihilism, where they just destroy everything in Gaza. Almost every hospital is either now... Well, hang on, let me finish. Is either destroyed or damaged in some way. We know this actually because we have to listen to British doctors who've come out and told everybody what is actually going on there, because, of course, international journalists are still banned by the IDF, even though they were allowed in previous conflicts in Gaza. They're not allowed in to verify anything in this one, which I find very suspicious. But here's my point, Elicia. I defended Israel's right to defend itself after October the 7th, not least because the Hamas spokesman went public almost immediately and said, we want to keep doing this. So I completely understand Israel's not just a need or a right, but a duty to defend its people. However, what we've seen in the last few months, with a 3-month blockade of starvation of already war-torn, impoverished people, and then this constant bombardment, including in the last 6 weeks, endless bombardments of people who are desperately lining up to get food. Now, they are dying, it seems, very mysteriously. The IDF says we shot in the air as warnings. Sometimes they use other language, which means they may have shot towards people they saw as a threat, or they are now investigating what happened. I read out earlier in a previous debate about this, all the different times this has happened in the last 6 weeks. It's endless. And the idea that the IDF are not killing people in this way, when everybody else involved says they are, is ridiculous. So the point I think Dave is making, quite straightforwardly, is that what the IDF's been doing in the last 3 months, to me, crosses any line of self-defence and could absolutely be categorised as terrorising the innocent people of Gaza. Now, it doesn't mean they're not in their heads going... In their heads, they're going after Hamas. Their motivation is, we want to kill the bad guys. But they have lost all sense of proportion, and they are now behaving in a way that if other people were doing it to them, they would categorise as terrorism.
Okay, so let me just answer you in 2 points. First of all, let me ask you this question. If Hamas was entirely separated from the civilian population, let's say it was totally down north and everyone else, up north and everyone else was down south, do you think that we'd see these civilian casualties?
But no enemy in modern warfare has ever been entirely separated from civilian populations. It's for the birds. It doesn't happen. My brother and my brother-in-law were both army colonels, right? It's for the birds. This idea you get some clean war where civilians are nowhere near any of it, it doesn't really happen ever.
Yes, it does happen, because you just used the example of Iran. You saw
Give me an example when no civilians have been killed in modern warfare.
It's not no civilians, it's the amount of civilians. Right. And it is the fact that Hamas, it doesn't just embed itself, it embeds its weaponry.
There are as many civilians in Lebanon. In fact, there are more civilians in Lebanon than there are in Gaza. How was it that Mossad was able to target 3,000 members of Hezbollah with a pager device that exploded? But in Gaza, the only way to deal with it, apparently, same situation, In Lebanon, Hezbollah live amongst civilians. The only way they can apparently do it in Gaza is to obliterate Gaza and kill tens of thousands of civilians as they go after Hamas. I don't understand the difference.
Okay, let me answer the question and then you'll understand. What you're doing right now is you're not just legitimizing Hamas's strategy, you are encouraging it.
No,
because the whole.
When did I encourage it?
Okay, well, let me explain.
Elicia,
and then
people
understand.
are listening to this, right? Okay, I mean, they know what I've said.
Piers, if you let me finish my sentence and then at the end of it, you can tell me if you agree. Should we agree on that?
Sure.
Okay. When Hamas intentionally embeds itself amongst civilian populations, the whole point of that strategy is that there'll be so much civilian casualties that the world will look at Israel and say, what an abhorrent pariah state that has lost all legitimacy. Okay, so let me finish. So every time the world does that, every time the world reacts in that way, it reinforces Hamas's behavior because it tells them this works. So in this moment that you're saying this, you are encouraging Hamas to keep doing that.
So we shouldn't talk about the 50, 60, 70,000 civilians.
No, you should.
Or however many it is. We don't actually know how many have been killed. We know we believe 70,000 have been killed, of which perhaps 25 to 30,000 are Hamas. We don't know because no one can ever give me actual figures.
You should talk about it and you should frame it within the context of look how much destruction there is when terrorists embed themselves in civilian populations, which
Dave,
just
let me get Dave to respond. Let me get Dave to respond.
I mean, listen, this is just we should talk about it, but only in the framework that it's not the fault of the people who are dropping the bombs on the innocent people or shooting the people who are the ones. Hey, you know what? You just asked. You just had. Excuse me. You just had your whole thing about let you finish and then you can respond to that. So why don't we do the same? I know.
And you stopped me when you were being
strawmanned. You opened by saying that Piers. You got interrupted when you said Piers was running cover for Hamas by pointing out that Israel's going too far. Quiet. Let me. No, you didn't. Your point stopped. Listen.
All right, don't talk over each other. Elicia, let Dave respond, and then you respond to him.
I listened to the garbage you had to say.
Let him respond, then you reply.
Let me get in now.
But I didn't say no response.
All right, but stop talking.
Lady, let me just save you all the time in this debate. You wanted to debate me because I'm so wrong about everything and I'm so influential, and you wanted to smack it down. It ain't gonna be you, lady. You're not the one who's gonna stop me. This is just ridiculous.
It's lady.
Okay, I'll call you whatever. Oh, okay, good one. Oh yeah, you really smacked down my bad ideas. Anyway, Piers, again, all they have. You're too stupid to realize it.
You're too stupid to realize how bad your ideas are.
There you go. That's the argument you got. Anyway, can I talk now?
Sure.
Okay. So, Piers, as always, it's just the same thing on repeat here, right? So the defense is to go, but look, the motivation of Israel is pure. The motivation of everybody else is evil, even though obviously what Israel is doing is objectively torturing women and children to death as they die with their bones crushed under rubble. But also, Piers, don't let it mess with you that at the highest levels of the Israeli government, they've kind of told you what their motivations are here. I mean, the South African case that they brought to the International Court of Justice was like 90% just direct quotes from Israeli leaders. The prime minister himself referred to them as Amalek when talking to the military. You got the finance minister, the defense minister bragging about how nobody's getting any food for a 3-month period, bragging that not 1 ounce of grain will get into Gaza. I mean, I'm sorry. This is obviously terrorism. It borders on genocide. It's horrifically wrong. And for you to use your example of saying like, oh, this is what I'm saying is that a guy who robs a store and a cop who comes to stop them are committing the same act because they're pointing a gun at each other. Yeah, but of course, in that example, they're right. But in that, no, that's what you said. That's what you said about my point. And it was really dumb. Because in that example, there aren't innocent people being slaughtered. Yeah, it kind of is. If there were,
it would still be different. Okay, so
Elicia, let me ask you a question, which is this. Are you comfortable with everything that Israel's done in the last 3 months?
No, I've always said that there should be dual criticism, and that's exactly what my problem has been this whole time. Everybody's criticizing Israel, which is fair, but why isn't anybody criticizing the reason why Gaza looks like this? Because Hamas has decided to embed itself.
They are, though. I mean, I couldn't have been more critical of Hamas going back 20 months. I mean, I still am now. I think they're a despicable terror group. Well, they're a despicable terror group who committed one of the worst terror attacks of modern times. I mean, it's
maybe your earpiece maybe wasn't working for the whole first 5 minutes of this, where me and Piers both agreed that the previous guest was ridiculous to downplay Hamas's crimes and that they had committed horrific acts of terrorism.
Elicia.
What I was responding to in terms of what Piers said to me, he was talking about why is it that we can do targeted military strikes in Iran, but we've decided to entirely desecrate Gaza. And my response was that, not saying that it was right, but I'm saying that when Hamas embeds itself in all of Gaza, it is going to result in ruin. And it reinforces the point that I've been making this entire time, not just since October 7th, but for the past 3 years that I've been talking about terrorist regimes, which is that they bring mass death and destruction everywhere they go.
Well, that is true. I agree with that. But I also know that Israel, through Mossad, have supposedly the most sophisticated, experienced intelligence operation in the world. And it was brilliantly seen with the Hezbollah pager attack. It was been brilliantly identified by the way they managed to identify where all the military leaders and nuclear scientists and nuclear sites were going to be in Iran for Israel to attack. From a purely military perspective and intelligence perspective, Israel did an extraordinary job, both with dealing with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime. However, it does just beg the obvious question. Why were they not able to foresee in any way, apparently, that Hamas were going to spend 20 years spending the billions of dollars which Netanyahu had encouraged them to have, because he believed in divide and rule with the Palestinian Authority, that they had these billions of dollars and were spending it on creating one of the world's biggest underground tunnel systems to operate from? And then how did Mossad not know anything about 3,000 Hamas terrorists pouring over its border when they're literally on their border and they're guarding it all day long? So I just cannot understand how this could have happened. And then I don't understand why Israel is responding in a way which it's never responded to anything like this in this way before. Why is Gaza? And then you had the Smodrich quotes, Elicia, where he brazenly talks now last week on camera that the plan now is to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. That is ethnic cleansing. That is a war crime.
That's obviously wrong. That's obviously wrong.
So we need to agree. We need to agree certain things like that, because honestly, it's important to me. It's like when people don't condemn Hamas, I sort of tune out, because it's like, the last guy, the moment he just said he was proud of what Hamas did, I tune out of him as a credible guest. But if you're prepared to admit, which very, very few pro-Israelis right now will admit, which is that some of this strategy is completely wrong, I think we may get somewhere.
It's so foundational to acknowledge that fact. It is so foundational to say that just because you have the right to defend yourself, it doesn't mean that you have carte blanche. It is so foundational to acknowledge all of these things, to acknowledge the death, the destruction, all of it. This is not what my conversation is about.
Okay.
This is not about, has there been damage or destruction or whatever. The whole point of this conversation is that you're making moral equivalencies. And these moral equivalencies blur the distinction between right and wrong, good and evil. Now, you can say that, but some of these actions look like they are evil in themselves. But the entire conversation always goes down to intent. That is what our entire criminal justice system is.
But I don't agree with that. I honestly don't agree. You've just said that unless I'm wrong, you've just said that some of the things Israel's been doing are evil. Right? You've drawn your own moral equivalency. You said both sides are doing... Well, hang on. Both sides are doing evil things. That's surely the point Dave Smith was making.
No, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's different. Because there is one side that kills ideology to protect its people, and there is one side that kills people to protect its ideology. That is the difference. I'm going to give you an example so you understand the nuance of what I'm trying to say. Let's say that there's a room of 100 people, okay? And in that 100 people, you're told that 10 of these people want to kill your people. Now, if you were to shoot and kill everyone in that room, that is objectively immoral and wrong. Objectively, right? But you are doing it out of protection. It's still disgusting and abhorrent and wrong. Now, let's say at the same time, you know that 10 people in that room of innocent civilians are against your ideology, and you murder the entire room to protect your ideology. Both actions are equally immoral and evil as each other, but the motivation is completely different, and you cannot make equivalencies of those motivations.
All right, Dave?
But you, in your own words, you just said that both actions are equally immoral. I mean, this just, it sounds, right. Okay. It sounds a lot like kind of the rationalization that your first guest was saying there, Piers, that like, well, you know, everybody serves in the IDF in Israel.